talking about replication strategies and ways in which you can try to quantitatively replicate another manager's or strategy's returns. So this is something that we do and have done with hedge fund strategies. I feel like when you just jump into the deep end of replicating hedge fund strategies, people kind of get lost. So I wanted to use this example of, well, if you were replicating Warren Buffett's returns, how would you do that? And I really think there's two primary ways in which this is done. The first is to say, let's look at Warren Buffett's track record and try to identify the stocks and the weights of those stocks that would give you as close to a similar return profile as possible, right? So figure out exactly what the holdings are, how much weight in each. And we call that a top-down approach. It's incredibly agnostic to how Warren Buffett picks stocks. It generally makes the assumption that, you know, whatever he's holding, he's going to continue holding, at least for the short term. But, you know, if Warren Buffett is holding stocks for decades, you know, and you know he's owning, say, Coca-Cola, well, you can put Coca-Cola in there, and that's going to help you sort of define his portfolio, and you can hold it. Problem is, if you have a strategy with higher turnover, there's only so much data you can use. You got to look at more recent returns. And from a data perspective, there's thousands of potential stocks. Now, Warren Buffett's a weird example because Berkshire also has private holdings. Ignoring that, though, this is sort of the top-down approach. The bottom-up approach would say, well, instead of trying to figure out what stocks he owns, let's try to figure out his actual strategy. What are the characteristics he looks for? How does he pick stocks? And if we can identify his process, then we can just try to use that process on a go-forward basis, and that should track his returns. So that's sort of what I would call a bottom-up approach. And as long as he doesn't have meaningful style drift over time, you can look at a lot longer of his history. So this is exactly what like factor-based replication is. There's a great paper from AQR called Buffett's Alpha, where they found that by and large, you can replicate a huge portion of Buffett's track record by saying, hey, just by, you know, high quality, low vol, safe companies, profitable companies, and lever them up 1.3 times, right? And if you just do that process on your own, you get a return stream that's very similar to Buffett. Does not take away from Buffett's alpha, by the way, because, you know, being 2015 and figuring out what Buffett was doing back in the 1970s is very different, right? Like, that's all with the benefit of hindsight. But if you're trying to replicate it going forward, my broad point in doing all this was just that, hey, here's two ways to think about replication, right? DBMF, the Managed Futures ETF from our friend Andrew Beer, takes this top-down approach where they're trying to look at recent returns of the SocGen CTA index and figure out what futures to hold and how much of those futures weight, positive or negative, to replicate those recent returns. It's a top-down approach. For whatever reason, people were like, well, no, you can't replicate Warren Buffett, or no, you should look at his 13F, or no, his returns have changed over time. I was like, you guys are completely missing the forest for the trees here. Like, none of this was about Warren Buffett. It was just about, that was an example of replication.